the Bloody Alphabet, we're talking about letter H with Henry H. Holmes. He's widely considered the country's first known serial killer. At an early age, he was interested in medicine, and he allegedly trapped animals and performed surgery on them. He graduated medical school and moved to Chicago in 1886, where he took a job as a pharmacist under the name Dr. H. Holmes. He built a house for himself, which was known as the Murder Castle, and it had secret passages, trapdoors, soundproof rooms, and doors that would be locked from the outside. He began seducing and murdering multiple women. He would become engaged to them and kill them after he controlled their life savings. This was to ensure that he would collect all of the money. It was said that he sold their bodies to local medical schools so he can get more money. At one point, him and a friend were working together to defraud an insurance company by faking the friend's death. Insurance investigators were alerted to the fraud, and Holmes was finally arrested in 1894. He went to trial for actually killing this friend, and he would then confess to 27 other murders. Some researchers even believe that he killed more than 200 people. He was sentenced to death by hanging, and that is the story of Henry H. Holmes.
On December 2nd, 1954, Leslie Irvin started his killing spree and terrorized southwestern Indiana. Irvin went on the run. He was eventually caught on April 15th when he confessed to 24 burglaries throughout southern Indiana. Irvin was also charged with 4 murders and admitted to 2 more. He was sentenced to death, and it was scheduled for June 12, 1955. After he was convicted, he was going to be transferred to another prison. A few days before his transfer, he actually was able to escape, and he fled to Vegas, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. They caught him on February 9th. A new trial went down, and he was then sentenced to life in prison. He ended up dying November 9th, 1983, from lung cancer at the age of 59. And that is the story of Leslie Irvin.
Today on the Bloody Alphabet, we're talking about letter J with Keith Hunter Jespersen. He is a Canadian-born American serial killer known as the Happy Face Killer for the smiley faces he drew on his many letters to the media. Keith was first arrested in 1995 for the murder of his girlfriend, Julie. In addition to his conviction for murdering Julie, he also was convicted for murdering 4 other women in Oregon, California, and Wyoming. While he sat in jail for the murder of Julie, he actually began talking to his attorney about other crimes that he committed. Keith had dreams of working for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. During his training as a policeman, he actually sustained a fall and was permanently dismissed. He then began work as a truck driver. He went on to murder 8 people in Nebraska, California, Florida, Washington, Oregon, and Wyoming in a span of 5 years. Keith was upset that he was not getting the attention for murdering these people, and he drew his first smiley face on a bathroom wall where he wrote an anonymous confession. He is currently serving 3 consecutive life sentences at the Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem. And that is the story of Keith Hunter Jespersen. Today on the Bloody Alphabet, we're working with letter K, and it's Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper III was also known as the Co-Ed Killer and is an American serial killer who was active in the early 1970s. Kemper was born in Burbank, California. He was very intelligent with an IQ of 136, however, he displayed sociopathic behavior from a young age. Started when he would torture and kill animals. He would also take his younger sister's dolls and remove their heads and hands. His favorite game to play as a child was gas chamber or electric chair, where he would have his sister tie him up in a chair and pretend he was being electrocuted. At one point, he even stalked his 2nd grade teacher. His mother was not the greatest person. She would lock him up in the basement due to fear of him doing something to his sisters. Edmund eventually went to go live with his grandmother and grandfather. On August 27, 1964, Kemper ended up shooting his grandmother while she sat at the kitchen table. He then shot his grandfather when he came home from grocery shopping so he didn't have to see his wife like that. He then called his mom, who urged him to call the police. When questioned, he said he just wanted to see what it felt like. At this point in time, Kemper was just 15 years old. Part 2 of Edmund Kemper. Kemper was committed to a state hospital where he befriended his psychologist and even became his assistant. After being in the state hospital for only 5 years, he was released into his mother's care in Santa Cruz, California. Kemper then went on to try to become a police officer. However, he was rejected because of his size. At just 21 years old, he was 6'9". Although he didn't make it into the police department, he maintained his relationship with the Santa Cruz police and got the nickname Big Ed. Kemper then went on to work at the Department of Transportation. He began his murder spree in May of 1972 and February of 1973, he would pick up female students hitchhiking and taking them to isolated rural areas and killing them. He would then take their body and bury them in fields. In April of 1973, Edmund murdered his mother. He then invited his mother's best friend over and murdered her as well. He then called the police and confessed to being the co-ed killer. However, since Ed and the police had such a good relationship, they didn't believe him at first. Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder on May 7th of 1973. On November 8th, 1973, Kemper was declared sane and guilty on all counts. He asked for the death penalty. However, he received 7 years years to life for each count. He's now staying at the California Medical Facility. He was denied parole in 2017 and is next eligible in 2024. And that is the story of Edmund Kemper. Today on the Bloody Alphabet, we're talking about letter L with Pedro Lopez. Pedro is a Colombian-born confessed serial killer accused of raping and killing more than 300 girls across South America. I'm not going into great detail because this man was an absolute monster. According to Lopez, his mother was a prostitute with 13 children. He was kicked out of the house at 8 years old due to doing things to his younger sister. By the time he was 18, he was already in prison. After his jail term, he started preying on young girls in Peru. By 1978, he had killed over 100 of them. Lopez eventually relocated to Colombia and later Ecuador, killing about 3 girls a week. He was finally arrested when an attempted abduction failed. He ended up confessing to over 300 murders, and the police believed him when a flash flood uncovered a mass grave of many of his victims. Pedro has not been heard from or seen since his release, and to date, no one knows if Lopez is dead or alive. And that is the story of Pedro Lopez. Today on the Bloody Alphabet, we're talking about letter M with Richard Lawrence Marquette. Richard was born December 12, 1934, and is an American convicted murderer. He went on to murder 3 women and dismembered and scattered their remains. He was the first person ever to be added as an 11th name on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Richard was arrested twice before going on and murdering these 3 women. He began murdering on June 8, 1961, and all 3 women were going about their normal day when they just vanished. Marquette's wanted flyers were released when the manager of an employment agency recognized his newest client as Richard Marquette. The FBI was notified and they surprised Marquette at work. He later told his captors, "I knew the FBI would get me sooner or later." He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He is currently 88 years old and he is staying at the state penitentiary in Salem. And that is the story of Richard Marquette. Today on the Bloody Alphabet, we're talking about letter M with Richard Lawrence Marquette. Richard was born December 12, 1934, and is an American convicted murderer. He went on to murder 3 women and dismembered and scattered their remains. He was the first person ever to be added as an 11th name on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Richard was arrested twice before going on and murdering these 3 women. He began murdering on June 8, 1961, and all 3 women were going about their normal day when they just vanished. Marquette's wanted flyers were released when the manager of an employment agency recognized his newest client as Richard Marquette. The FBI was notified and they surprised Marquette at work. He later told his captors, "I knew the FBI would get me sooner or later." He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He is currently 88 years old and he is staying at the state penitentiary in Salem. And that is the story of Richard Marquette.